We've introduced histograms, we've talked about how to interpret them, so now what we want to talk about is how to actually use StatCrunch to construct these histograms. What we'll do is, after you've logged into StatCrunch and have your data entered in, you'll select the graph menu, and then under that menu, select histogram. You'll see this window pop up, and there will be a few things that we need to select, and then things that we have the option of changing. So the first thing we'll need to do is select our data set. So we'll click on one of those. Once it's selected, it'll move into the second window. We have some features in here we won't worry about. We will make use of the bins option. So keep in mind bins being the same thing as classes. If we want to control something about our classes or our bins, we'll make use of these two features. We have the start at option, so we can force an initial value for our histogram, and we can force a bin width or a class width. If we leave those as optional, then StatCrunch will just choose the widths and starting points that it thinks are most appropriate. If we have problems where we want to manipulate that and make a certain picture appear, we want to make some adjustments, then we have those features available to us. And then under graph properties, there's options to change color schemes, labels, give your graph a main title. So those are all the sort of things that can make your graph prettier. If you are submitting a report where you have to turn this in and you want something to be a little more visual or dynamic. So what we want to do is go log into StatCrunch, make use of these different options with this tool, and we want to construct a histogram for this data below. So this is the same data that we were looking at in the previous examples. This is the data on police officer deaths for northeastern and midwestern states, and we're going to construct histograms with a few different options. We're going to make some of those different types of histograms. Now, I've already entered this data into StatCrunch to give myself a little bit of a head start. Keep in mind MyLabs Plus has the nice feature where you can import data sets. Since this wasn't in MLP, the only way to really get this in is to either copy and paste that data in or just manually type it in. So once you have that data entered in StatCrunch, the next thing is to go to that graph menu and select histogram. We always have to start by selecting the data that we want to work with. This will be true for almost probably any operation that we use in StatCrunch. We select the data that we want to use, and then we need to consider for histograms, do we want a start at value or a width? Now, the simplest case is we just select our data value and click compute, we get a histogram. There are no options or features that we have to input, we just have to select one data set. However, in this question, we're asked to construct a histogram with a class width of 200, a class width of 100, and a relative frequency histogram. So I have this graph constructed, but I want to go back a screen because I didn't include any of those options. So I can click on options and edit, and this will just take me back to this menu. So now I can change some of these things. So part A says a histogram with a class width of 200. So we just tell it our class width should be 200. And then we click compute. So that sets our class width to be 200, which was actually the default setting, what StatCrunch chose for us. So we can go back to that edit screen and now say instead of a width of 200, we want to see what this would look like with a class width of 100. And now it updates that graph to generate this new picture now with a class width of 100. So anytime you need to change the class width, you simply go back to this screen, plug in some number for width. We can also change that optional starting number. So a case where you might want to do something like that would be, in this case, our data does start at 0, but let's say our smallest data value is 400. If our smallest data value is 400, StatCrunch is probably going to start our graph at 400 and go from there. So we could set a manual start of 0 just to show and really make it clear that no data values between 0 and 400 occurred. So you do have the option if you want a manual start. The last thing that we're asked to do is, instead of constructing a histogram, is construct a relative frequency histogram. So under this type option, it's set to frequency. We can change that to relative frequency. And that's it. Now we have a relative frequency histogram. So instead of these values along the y-axis telling us the absolute values, the frequency or number in that class, now it's telling us about percentages. So that's pretty simple for using histograms. It basically comes back to those different features. Again, all the basic minimum you have to do is select the data set, but then if a homework question or exam question is asking for anything more specific, you can change the type of graph, you can change the starting value, and you can change the bin width.